Hello and welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great works of English literature into gripping radio. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and today we're bringing you the final part in our 5-part adaptation of The Yellow Face, a classic Sherlock Holmes mystery from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Holmes and Watson have traveled to Norbury, near London, to investigate the strange behavior of Effie Munro, the wife of their client, Grant Munro. Effie has been behaving strangely ever since mysterious strangers moved into a neighboring cottage, appearing fearful and distressed and begging her husband not to question her actions or investigate. But there is something very odd about these neighbors indeed, as a horrifyingly strange and inhuman face watches from the upper window of the cottage, a face with a peculiar yellow shade. As we rejoin the story, Holmes and Watson arrive at the station in Norbury and prepare to uncover exactly what is going on between young Effie and the strange inhabitants of this cottage. Munro was waiting for us on the platform when we stepped off the evening train, and we could see by the light of the station lamps that he was very pale and quivering with agitation. He lay his hand at once upon Holmes's sleeve.
They're still there, Mr. Holmes. I saw lights in the cottage as I came down. We shall settle it now, once and for all.
We walked together down the dark, tree-lined road.
What is your plan, then?
I'm going to force my way in and see for myself who is in the house. I wish you both to be there as witnesses.
You are quite determined to do this in spite of your wife's warning that it is better that you do not try to solve the mystery?
Yes, I am determined.
Well, I think that you are in the right. Any truth is better than indefinite doubt. We had better go up at once. Of course, legally we are putting ourselves hopelessly in the wrong, but I think that it is worth it.
It was a very dark night, and a thin rain began to fall as we turned from the high road into a narrow lane, deeply rutted, with hedges on either side. Mr. Grant Munro pushed impatiently forward, however, and we stumbled after him as best we could. Munro pointed to a glimmer among the trees.
There are the lights of my house, and here's the cottage which I'm going to enter.
We turned a corner in the lane as he spoke, and there was the building close beside us. A yellow bar falling across the black foreground showed that the door was not quite closed, and one window in the upper story was brightly illuminated. As we looked, we saw a dark blur moving across the blind.
There is that creature. You can see for yourselves that someone is there. Now follow me, and we shall soon know all.
We approached the door, but suddenly a woman appeared out of the shadow and stood in the golden track of the lamplight. I could not see her face in the darkness, but her arms were thrown out in an attitude of entreaty.
For God's sake, don't, Jack. I'd a sense that you would come this evening. Think better of it, dear. Trust me again, and you will have never cause to regret it.
I've trusted you too long, Effie. Let go of me. I must pass you. My friends and I are going to settle this matter once and forever.
He pushed her to one side, and we followed closely after him. As he threw the door open, an old woman ran out in front of him and tried to bar his passage, but he thrust her back, and an instant afterwards, we were all on the stairs. Grant Munro rushed into the lighted room at the top, and we entered at his heels. It was a cozy, well-furnished room, with 2 candles burning upon the table and 2 upon the mantelpiece. In the corner, stooping over a desk, there sat what appeared to be a little girl. Her face was turned away as we entered, but we could see that she was dressed in a red frock and that she had long white gloves on. As she whisked round to us, I gave a cry of surprise and horror. The face which she turned towards us was of the strangest yellow color, and the features were absolutely devoid of any expression. An instant later, the mystery was explained. Holmes, with a laugh, passed his hand behind the child's ear, a mask peeled off from her face, and there was a little dark-skinned girl, her white teeth flashing in amusement at our amazed faces. I burst out laughing, out of sympathy with her merriment, but Grant Munro stood staring, with his hand clutching his throat.
My God, what can be the meaning of this?
At his words, Munro's wife swept into the room with a proud, set face.
I will tell you the meaning of it. You have forced me, against my own judgment, to tell you. And now we must both make the best of it. My husband died at Atlanta. My child survived.
Your child?
She drew a large silver locket from her bosom.
You have never seen this open?
Understood that it did not open.
She touched a spring, and the front hinged back. There was a portrait within of a man strikingly handsome and intelligent-looking, but bearing unmistakable signs upon his features of his African heritage.
That is John Hebron of Atlanta, and a nobler man never walked the earth. I cut myself off from my family in order to wed him, but never once while he lived did I for an instant regret it. Our little Lucy took more after him than I, but dark or fair, she is my own dear little angel.
The little girl ran across at the sound of her mother's voice and nestled up against her dress.
When I left her in America, it was only because her health was weak, and the change might have done her harm. She was placed into the care of a faithful Scotch woman who had been once our servant. Never for an instant did I dream of disowning her as my child. But when chance threw you in my way, Jack, and I learned to love you, I feared to tell you about my child. God forgive me. I feared that I should lose you. And I had not the courage to tell you. I had to choose between you, and in my weakness, I turned away from my own little girl. For 3 years, I've kept her existence a secret from you, but I heard from a nurse, and I knew that all was well with her. At last, however, there came an overwhelming desire to see the child once more. I struggled against it, but in vain. I knew the danger. I determined to have the child brought over even still, if it were for but a few weeks. I sent £100 to the nurse, and I gave her instructions about this cottage so that she might come as a neighbour, without my appearing to be in any way connected with her. I pushed my precautions so far as to order her to keep the child in the house during the daytime and to cover up her little face and hands so even those who might see her at the window should not gossip about there being a black child in the neighbourhood. If I'd been less cautious, I might have been more wise. But I was half crazy with fear that you should learn the truth. It was you who first told me that the cottage was occupied. I should have waited for the morning, but I could not sleep for excitement, and so at last I slipped out, knowing how difficult it is to wake you. But you saw me go, and that was the beginning of my troubles. Next day you had my secret at your mercy, but you nobly refrained from pursuing your advantage. 3 days later, however, the nurse and child only just escaped from the back door as you rushed in at the front one, and now tonight you at last know all. And I ask you, what is to become of us, my child and me?
She clasped her hands and waited for an answer. It was a long 10 minutes before Grant Munro broke the silence, and when his answer came, it was one of which I love to think on. He lifted the little child, kissed her, and then, still carrying her, he held his other hand out to his wife and turned towards the door.
We can talk it over more comfortably at home. I am not a very good man, Effie, but I think that I am a better one than you have given me credit for being.
Holmes and I followed them down the lane, and my friend plucked at my sleeve as we came out.
I think that we shall be of more use in London than in Norbury.
Not another word did he say of the case until late that night, when he was turning away with his lighted candle for his bedroom.
Watson, if it should ever strike you that I am getting a little overconfident in my powers, or giving less thought to a case than it deserves, kindly whisper Norbury in my ear, and I shall be very much obliged to you.
And with that, we come to the end of our tale, and the mystery is uncovered. The residents of the cottage were not, in fact, the malicious blackmailers that Holmes suspected, led by Effie's deformed former husband. In fact, there was nothing malicious in Effie's action beyond her well-justified fear of the racism of her society and the harm that any knowledge of her past life might have on her new husband. For you see, while in America, she had married an African-American man named John Hebron, at a time when such unions were regarded with horror by a deeply racist society. Effie had loved her husband, a successful lawyer in the Georgian city of Atlanta, and had had a child with him, a girl. When John Hebron died suddenly of yellow fever and her daughter became ill as well, Effie returned to England, leaving her child in the care of her former servant until she was well enough to travel. While in England, she met Grant Munro and fell in love. With this new marriage, Effie became overcome by fear. Fear that Grant Munro would be so horrified by knowledge of her former marriage to a black man and of her mixed-race daughter that he would divorce her. But, as a mother, Effie couldn't bear to abandon her child, and so had her brought to England that they might see each other once again. But Effie feared that her neighbors might gossip in disgust at the news of a mixed-race child living among them, and so she, quite wrongly perhaps, chose to disguise her, making her wear that unsettling yellow mask. In the end, however, Effie's fear about her husband proved unfounded, as Grant Munro welcomes his new stepdaughter into his life with love and openness, inviting her into his home and forgiving his wife for doubting him. This is a remarkably progressive tale for its time, and one of the few mysteries in the series where Holmes' initial theories about a case are eventually proven wrong. From BeFM Drama, this is your host, Joshua Cornwell.